In this lecture today, we're going to talk about future-oriented thinking. Future-oriented thinking is really inherent in the notion of the American dream. It allows us to think about our future, plan for the big important types of events in our lives. But as Ellen Goodman has noted, future-oriented thinking in many ways is making our lives busy, and it's part of really the downfall of planning in the future is that you might ultimately end up not being able to savor the moment. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what makes humans unique among all the animals. Really this ability to, or this capacity to travel backwards and forwards in time. And in many ways we use the present moment to relive our past events, to think about them both positively and negatively, and to simulate the future, to think about how we'll feel in the future if we do certain types of, take part in certain types of actions. And so in this way, the present is actually really just a function of mental time travel most of the way. And so, since mental time travel is so important, really there's three major future-oriented temporal perspectives: self-efficacy, optimism, and hope, and that's going to be really the entire lecture for today. What's important to also remember is, when we're thinking about self-efficacy or optimism and hope, is that all people vary in how they feel about the past, present, and especially the future. So, for example, certain questions we might ask is, can you accomplish your goals for the future? What are your goals? And if something prevents you from accomplishing your goals, how would you explain this barrier? Which sort of explanatory style would you use? So we'll start by looking at self-efficacy. It's one of the three major future-oriented temporal perspectives in positive psychology, in addition to optimism and hope. And it's one you may have heard a lot about in other classes, specifically developmental psychology. Of course, the founder, the creator of the concept of self-efficacy is Albert Bandura. At the foundation of his argument is that self-reflection is really this uniquely human characteristic. It's part of what really makes us who we are, is our ability to look at ourselves and to self-reflect and to think about our motivations and to think about our behaviors. And part of what happens when we think about our goals is we have a perceived self-efficacy, which is really our beliefs in the capabilities that we have to attain any specific goal that we want to attain. So one of the major core concepts of self-efficacy is that it's a belief that you can accomplish what you want, or a lack of a belief that you can accomplish what you want if you were to have low self-efficacy. So Maddox has this great quote, basically says, what I believe I can do with my skills under certain circumstances is really at the heart of what is self-efficacy. So I want you to think about a goal that you have right now. If you need some time, you can pause the lecture at this point, maybe even write out a specific type of goal. And when you're finished with that, come back and here's a couple of questions I want to ask you. So number one, what needs to be done for you to accomplish your goal? I mean, what do you need to do in order to reach this desired goal that you have? These behaviors that need to be done are what we would call outcome expectancies. That's different than your analysis of your capabilities to complete those necessary actions to reach that goal, which is efficacy expectations. So how confident are you in your ability to actually complete all the necessary actions to reach your goals, this sort of step-by-step process? That's what we would really call efficacy, and it's your expectation or your perception of your abilities to actually work through all of those different types of steps that really makes up sort of the heart of what your self-efficacy is. And so what's important is that self-efficacy plays this major role in the goals that you set, in the tasks that you try and accomplish every day, and really even the challenges that you approach. And what's interesting is that most individuals actually don't have a lot of variability in their outcome expectancies. Bandura said that really, efficacy expectations don't add a whole lot into predicting our different types of behaviors. And so it's important when we think about self-efficacy to remember and there's quite a bit of debate in this, but Bandura himself really believed that self-efficacy was a belief system about using specific abilities and skills in specific circumstances or domains. In other words, that self-efficacy is a belief that a person has in his or her ability to succeed in a particular situation with a particular goal. Others in the book talks quite a bit about this, have tried to measure global self-efficacy, your sort of belief system that you have about your ability to accomplish sort of any type of goal. And while those do have some predictive validity, Bandura himself really felt that self-efficacy should reflect specific beliefs about your abilities and skills, again, in specific sort of circumstances. And so with that in mind, let's look at a couple of examples of sort of the power of self-efficacy. So one of the things that I always find fascinating, particularly as a professor's side, is the fact that student difficulties in sort of basic academic skills are often not directly related to their abilities, but really more in their beliefs about what they can and cannot do, whether they can write or handle numbers or even think well. And so it's really not such that people often have deficiencies in their actual abilities, sort of objective deficiencies, but really many students have difficulty in school because they don't believe they have the capabilities of performing successfully. And I think that that's really sort of interesting, is that these goals that we have that we're trying to attain are really best predicted by the beliefs that we hold. So there's a ton of research that's sort of been outlined in this area. I want to just highlight a couple of things that are really important. So first off, if you look at the correlation between academic self-efficacy and academic performance, so your belief in your ability to do well in the academic domain and your actual, usually your GPA, these correlations have been very strong and very positive. Typically, the correlations ranging between about 0.5 and 0.7. So really, really important predictors. What's also really interesting is that math self-efficacy in particular, what I'll sort of think about for a couple of slides here in a row, is that it's the strongest, math self-efficacy is the strongest direct effect on math problem solving. Math self-efficacy is actually more important in your ability to solve mathematical problems than your self-concept or your perceived usefulness of the different type of task, or even your previous mathematical experience. And actually self-efficacy, so again, this perception that you have, its impact on your mathematical performance was just as strong as your actual mathematical ability. And one of the major reasons for this is because math self-efficacy really has this strong, what we call indirect impact. And so it produces a particular type of behavior that ends up resulting in a further behavior. And so math self-efficacy indirectly impacts math performance through increased persistence. So if you think that you're going to do really well in math, or if you really think that you can actually accomplish all the steps to get through the mathematical problem, you just continue to work at the problem much longer. And as an individual who's seen a lot of people work on statistical problems, often one of the most important ingredients to doing well in a statistics class is just your ability to sit there and persist on the task. And of course, there's individual differences on how long people will persist and how long someone might actually need to persist, but ultimately persistence is exceedingly important. Okay, so now and this is going to be really important in the second half of the lecture when we compare self-efficacy with learned optimism and dispositional optimism. But self-efficacy is essentially a learned pattern of thinking. People engage in a behavior, they interpret the outcomes of their actions, they develop these different types of beliefs, and then they act in a consistent way with the beliefs that they've created. So one of the major questions is, well, how do these self-efficacy beliefs, how are they actually learned? There's four major things that can actually impact how much you actually learn. And probably the most influential is mastery experience. Obviously, if you want to develop your self-efficacy, the most important thing you can do is perform the task successfully, and that will strengthen your sense of self-efficacy. But there's also some other ways that you can develop it. You can have vicarious experiences, so seeing someone who's similar to you actually sustaining their effort, that'll raise your self-efficacy. Verbal encouragement from others can really overcome self-doubt, these social messages, and actually your physiological arousal helps you gauge the degree to which you're actually going to do good at a task. And so when we look at these sort of cultural differences or cultural context, I think there's some really interesting ones here. So, and some of them are pretty much what you'd think. So, women have higher self-efficacy in math and language arts, males in math and social sciences. But actually, vicarious learning is really important for females in science, while mastery experiences is really important for males.